start this speech off by telling you all a story. This is the story of a boy. Now, the name of this boy really doesn't matter, because long before anybody decided to learn his name, he had been given a different one. Now, the name he was given changed by the day. Sometimes he was called smart, sometimes quiet. Most of the times, though, he was simply just known as weird. All of these names were different. Some made him feel empowered, others not so much. But they all had something in common. None of the names were his. They were labels, masks that people put over his face because it was easier to do so than learn what he looked like. And as so often the case, once you wear a mask for so long, it becomes a part of you. Now, this story is a metaphor for the harms that labels can inflict upon society. It's a sad story, and in some ways quite scary as well. And if I'm being completely honest, this story isn't fiction. You know, I've been that boy before. I've often internalized a lot of names that weren't mine. And I'm sure you or people you know have been that boy before as well. Such an anecdote would usually precede a speech that would go on to explain the sociological and scientific reasons for why labels are so negative for society. Spoiler alert, this is not one of those talks. Let's first start off by defining what a label is. What do you all think about when you hear the word label? Do you think about a sticker on a water bottle? Do you think about a tag on a shirt? Do you think about a title on a form you fill out? Well, in sociological and psychological terms, the word label simply means a short word or a phrase used to describe and categorize someone based on a specific trait that they may have. This trait may be a personality trait, maybe physical. It can be a variety of different things. Now, a label by itself seems harmless enough, but we all know that's not the case. It's not the label that's so harmful per se, but what comes with it. This is labeling theory. Labeling theory is the idea that overgeneralizing labels assigned to a person influence not only how others see them, but how they see themselves. For example, a child that is often called disruptive in the classroom will soon start to see themselves as nothing but a person with the capacity to annoy others. There are a lot of negative impacts that come with labeling theory, ranging from the depression to the body dysmorphia that it might cause. But perhaps the most negative aspect of this is our utter desensitization to labeling theory. After all, we hear labels thrown on each other every single day, in our classrooms, on social media, in our homes, in every single corner of our lives. We hear the phrase, "Don't judge a book by its cover." And what is the first thing that we do? Well, we throw that phrase out the window entirely. Labels are so deeply ingrained into our society that we forget the power that these words hold over others, the chokehold they have on other people's characteristics, their traits, sometimes even their physical traits as well. Now, labels are so common and so powerful, in fact, that I'm sure you all already have images for common labels. What do I mean by that? Well, let's all partake in a small thought experiment. Yeah? When I say the word athlete, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? I'm willing to bet that the image that comes to your mind looks something like some of these images on screen. And I'm also willing to bet that the image that came up in your mind pretty much matches the image that everybody else in this room came up with as well. This is not by chance. Our images of certain labels have been built up through time, through stories, through so many repeated assumptions until it basically became automatic. Now, we use this image of, say, an athlete to subjugate others. Other people whose traits may, in one way or another, match our image. And we slowly force them to conform. We twist their other characteristics to match the image as well. It is a deeply destructive process. Now, faced with this much negative evidence regarding labels and labeling theory, it's clear to see why many people believe that labels are a net negative for society. Maybe even you, the audience. But today, I want to offer you something more uncomfortable. An opinion that is perhaps slightly more nuanced. Let's turn our attention back to the definition of a label. What is a label? Well, a label is an adjective for people. Calling someone tall, short, smart, or dumb doesn't immediately trap them within the confines of the word. It doesn't immediately erase every single dimension of who they are, because at the end of the day, it is just a word. Now, yes, labels do bring about the negative impacts of labeling theory. But I stand here before you to argue that labels are not the cause of labeling theory. They are merely the harbinger. Now you may be wondering to yourselves, why is this boy so intent on defending labels? Well, the reason is very simple. We, as a society, cannot exist without labels. Without labels, we would be completely unable to understand one another. Utterly deaf, dumb, and blind to ourselves and the rest of society. I know that I may sound dramatic, but please understand that I am being completely serious. To illustrate my point, please take a look at my next slide. This is the Coastline paradox. Now, the coastline paradox is a mathematical paradox that states that the length of a coastline can never be truly measured. Why? Well, let's take a look here. On my screen, we have 4 different variations of attempts at measuring a coastline. To the left, a coastline is measured by a large purple ruler. And the estimated length that we have is so far away from reality. To the right, we have a coastline that is measured by a much smaller yellow ruler. And we can see that the length, the estimate that we have, is a lot larger than what we see on the left. And certainly a lot more close to reality. Well, what if we keep getting smaller? What if we keep shortening the length of that ruler? Well, it becomes clear as the ruler shortens and the length gets longer that this process can continue on forever. We can never truly measure the length of a coastline because it stretches on to infinity. The best thing we can do is to estimate. Now, what does a radical paradox have to do with the way we treat each other as people? Absolutely everything. Human beings are just like our coastlines. They are jagged, imperfect, full of inlets and curves that cannot be seen from far away. The closer you look, the more you realize how much detail really is there. We are unknowable, and we are infinite. This comparison between humans and coastlines tells us two things. Number one, the use of overgeneralizing labels really gives us an estimate that is so far off from reality that it stops being practical at all. In coastline terms, think of it as using a purple ruler to measure our coastline. Secondly, if we remove the concept of labels entirely from our society, we destroy the only tool that we have to understand one another. Because at the end of the day, that's what labels are. They're tools. That's why they're not inherently evil. In a perfect world, we would all use labels for their intended purpose, to discover the amazing and beautiful world that lies in each of us beyond the surface. In a perfect world, that's what would happen. Unfortunately, we do not live in a perfect world. The reason that labels have become so vilified in our society is because they are almost synonymous with bullying, conformity, and limits. We love estimates, don't we? We see a label, an overgeneralizing, hasty label on someone, and we don't think to question it. We see a mile-long ruler slapped across a coastline, and our first instinct is that the true length has been measured perfectly and accurately. And when I say we, I mean all of us. We are all guilty, conscious or not, of using labels as a limiter instead of as a tool. Labels were never meant to be the whole person. The closer you look, the more you realize you don't see. A quiet person may seem accurate at a distance, but the closer you look, the more you see. You might see observant. You might see reflective. An athlete reveals strength, discipline, hard work, and sacrifice. A smart person has embraced both failure and curiosity. So the issue was never within our labeling. It was within our labels, in their finality, in their rigidity, and our failing to realize that labels were never meant to be a container for the person. In the beginning of my talk, I told you about a boy who had masks put on his face by other people. But maybe the issue isn't in the act of placing a mask. After all, masks can be used for a variety of purposes. Masks can protect, masks can be used to express oneself. The issue arises in situations where by one reason or another, the mask simply refuses to come off. When we stop questioning what's underneath that mask. Labels give us a hook. A good way to start understanding who a person truly is. But they were never meant to define our entire being. So the next time that you see yourself putting a hasty label on someone else, or even yourself, I want you to step back. I want you to ask more questions. I want you to slowly let the mask come off. Because nobody deserves to live with a name that was never